Wow, so that game was a challenge. I haven't produced much video content for a while now, but I felt inspired to create this video because this game can be a real arse kicker. At this point there are already lots of videos about Chaos Gate, but when I wanted help, I found that many of them were full walkthroughs, which are great, but can be very time consuming to sit through if all you want to do is find out how not to get massacred. Most of the game's missions are also random, and so are the rewards, so any walkthrough you follow is likely going to differ quite a bit from your own playthrough. That was certainly the issue I encountered when I was trying to beat the game. But I have now beaten the game, so the purpose of this video is to offer some general advice on strategy and tactics and how the game's mechanics work that can be used in any playthrough, which is what I would have liked to have seen when I was getting my arse kicked, and I'm sure I'm not alone. So if you've tried to play this game and just found yourself shouting at the screen in frustration, yelling, "This game is impossible!" then hopefully I can ease your pain, because I've been there myself, believe me. This game is brutal, and I ran through the full gamut of emotions with it, from tension, anxiety, exasperation and seething anger, through to elation, joy and satisfaction when I finally got the better of a difficult mission or boss encounter. The first thing to know is this is not a game that you can just play on normal and expect to muddle through all the way to the end. You absolutely have to master its systems, or even normal difficulty can seem like legendary after just a handful of missions. But like any game, it is built on systems that you can learn to read and turn to your advantage. The real meat and potatoes of this game is in its combat encounters, of course, so let's start there. The tutorial mission introduces you to the turn-based mechanics of the combat, but it doesn't fully explain how to use these mechanics to turn encounters to your advantage, which kind of makes sense. The game gives you enough information to get started, but it isn't going to tell you exactly how to beat it, although important information is shown in later missions as on-screen banners that players may miss if they are just clicking through to get to the action. Knowing how to approach combat encounters is vital, because your units take ages to recover from wounds, and later missions involving bloom flowerings and the eponymous Chaos Gates can be really challenging. To always get the upper hand, you need action points. Every knight starts a turn with 3 of them, but there are ways to get more if you know how. The more action points you have, the quicker you can close the distance with your enemies and get in about them, which you do want to do because your knights are far more effective at close range than at distance. Ideally, what you want to do is get all of your units as close to a group of enemies as possible without triggering the encounter. The map helpfully makes this possible by highlighting enemy group locations, and you can judge how close you are to triggering the encounter by looking at where the map goes dark. This shows the extent of your unit's line of sight. As soon as the enemy becomes visible, the encounter will trigger. You want to have all of your units moved as close as possible to this boundary before you start the encounter. And you always want to start a combat encounter yourself if possible, for the simple reason that if you initiate combat during your turn, all of your units will be restored to 3 action points. Knowing this is the basis of how you can turn nearly all combat encounters to your advantage. Let's look at an example. In this situation, my interceptor, who has the teleport ability, is ahead of my other units. The remaining knights use all 3 of their action points just to catch up to him. However, by using the interceptor to move forward once they've caught up and trigger the combat encounter, my knights once again have 3 AP to use. By only initiating combat when all my knights are together and can support each other, I can decimate the enemy before they have a chance to do anything. With armoured units, instead of attacking straight away, you may want to set up Overwatch on them if you can't kill the unit in a single turn. Even if you damage the enemy, its armor protection will be restored after your turn ends, at least until you acquire weapons that can break armor. However, Overwatch can strip away armor protection for 1 turn, making these units much easier to kill during your next turn to attack. Be mindful, however, that Overwatch can be disrupted by melee attacks and grenades. One other proviso I would add is that the strategy of gaining extra AP by triggering combat encounters only seems to work once per turn. If you're in the middle of a scrap and see a second group approaching and are thinking to yourself that you can get another 3 AP back a second time, you will likely be disappointed. That's why ideally you want to deal with enemy groups one at a time. Now, sometimes you will trigger a combat encounter accidentally when you get too close to a group and you end up spotting them. It happens all the time. That's why you want to save after each turn, at least at first until you get used to approaching enemies. The save function is there for a reason. You can use it during combat, so remember to use it. The other way to give yourself a battlefield edge is through automated actions. Most of these will be unlocked through character upgrades. However, the one automatic attack that you can use from the start is melee. When you have someone equipped with a melee weapon and they are standing next to an enemy, they will attack their foe automatically if the enemy tries to move away from them. Hence, it's not always a bad thing to leave a unit next to an enemy at the end of your turn. It either keeps the enemy pinned or you get a free hit. Unless the enemy can use a disruption attack, but we'll get to that. Some of the best automated actions to unlock are the support fire option, which can help you chain multiple attacks together, and rapid reload, so you don't have to use an AP just to reload your weapon. So look out for these and get them as soon as possible for at least a couple of units.
Your will be done.
In summary, being able to attack first and more frequently than your enemy is how you'll always beat them. Be cautious when approaching combat and aggressive once you are in combat. If you timed your attack well, all of your units should be able to attack the enemy before they can respond. In the early game, this should be enough to kill half of the enemy squad or more, with most engagements lasting no more than 2 turns. If you have to go to 3 turns or more, that's when you will start to suffer significant damage. Now we've taken a look at combat, let's turn our attention to campaign progression and resource management. Your ship is in a dire state at the beginning of the game and needs numerous repairs.
As of this moment, reviving the Edict's core power output takes absolute primacy.
And there are a whole host of upgrades to do as well. Servitors are the resource for repairs and ship upgrades. You can't do any without them. When new missions appear on the campaign map, personally I would prioritize the ones that give you servitors, at least at first. Ship upgrades will allow you to generate new servitors, but this is just a trickle at first, so you will need the rewards from missions to ensure that you can always have repairs or a ship upgrade on the go. Having a huge barracks is probably a lesser priority in the early game because you'll likely want to use the same units as much as possible for experience and the character upgrades that experience brings. Faster engines will be useful for being able to reach more than one mission per cycle, and research is also very important. Campaign advancement is triggered by completing specific pieces of research, and if you take too long to advance through the campaign, the game will start to punish you by throwing up numerous rock-hard missions per cycle, so faster research is also a priority. The Chaos Gate missions are the toughest in the game by far. Thankfully, you don't have to do them, but if you fail 5 of them, then it's game over. They don't start to appear until you are deep into the campaign, however, so by the time you get one, you should have some better weapons and armor available, which will make things easier. And I'm going to cover that next. In fact, I'll cover it right now.
Please ensure they pay attention.
To get better equipment, you need requisition points. Lots of them. You get some requisition points from completing missions, like all missions will give them, and you can choose the optional objectives to get more, although if you fail you will lose requisition. And there are some pieces of research that also provide requisition. Armor, weapons and war gear are divided into 3 tiers, with tier 3 being the best. Mission rewards are random, so you can get tier 2 and 3 gear at almost any stage, but the chances of doing so are pretty slim at first and can be improved by spending requisition points after each Grandmaster's report. Personally, I wouldn't bother with any tier 1 equipment, as it will be just above useless in the late game. So in the early game, I'd save requisition points to accumulate for the Grand Master's report, so you can get those lovely tier 2 and 3 Master Gear ASAP. Master Gear have extra abilities, but what makes them so much better is that they can be upgraded. You will need bloom seeds to do this. The Extractor Servo Skull is incredibly useful for getting bloom seeds, so I would definitely make use of this when it becomes available and you're building up your seed collection. Without the Extractor Servo Skull, the only way to extract a seed from an enemy is to get a critical hit on them. You can guarantee this with two abilities: Astral Aim for ranged hits, and Hammer Hand for melee hits. The cost of upgrading weapons and armor is initially quite high, but can be reduced through research as well. Upgrading tier 2 and 3 weapons and armor to maximize their advantages is how you will turn your unit of Grey Knights into unstoppable killing machines that will laugh in the face of chaos. Melee weapons that increase critical hit chances and also stun are especially useful, along with ranged weapons that add or increase armor break, since late game enemies are usually very heavily armored. Also, the silencer weapon,
For Titan!
P silencer, I assume the P is silent, has the disruption ability, and this will prove very useful for a lot of the boss encounters that you have later in the game. Bosses tend to have automated responses to being attacked, but you can stop these from occurring by using a disruption attack. Some enemies also have disruption attacks, which they will use to prevent your automated responses.
I am the Wrath of Xiphos!
This should be enough information to see you through the early game,
Yes, you've taken enough of my time.
and a strong early game will make the late game far less troublesome. Chaos Gate is just one of those games that can be hard to get into because the early game is often more difficult when you are new and your units are weakest. This game is unapologetically difficult to players who neglect mastering its mechanics. So let me know if there's anything you think I missed, or if this has indeed helped you turn back the spread of the bloom. Good luck with it, and don't forget,
We are the Hammer. Remember that.